The Energy Nerd Show and Tell Show is like a library, except instead of millions of books with thousands of pages and great works of literature, we have one page and some nerd talking about it. So, hey, who's our guest today?
Natasha George, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So Natasha runs a company in Somerville, Some EV, and I know we want to hear a little bit about the company. We also really want to dig into the graphs. So
let's start talking about batteries, I guess.
So prior to founding my company, I worked as a battery engineer at a startup that was scaling lithium metal batteries from R&D to low volume manufacturing. So this is one of the plots since starting my company that I really like to reference when I talk about advancements we've made in battery technology. Just to dive right in, I'm sure everyone knows the watt hour is a measure of the total energy that's available in the battery. And on the x-axis, you have the energy density in watt hours per kilo. And this is a measure of how much energy is packed into a kilogram of any material. This is an important metric because you obviously don't want a really heavy battery to lug around in your phone or your electric vehicle. And then on the y-axis, you have volumetric energy density in watt hours per liter. And this is the amount of energy that is packed into a liter of material. It's really just a way to think of the amount of energy in any given space. So if you look at this plot and you start on the bottom left, you start with PB, which is lead acid. And lead acid batteries have been around for a while. They were invented in the late 1850s. And as we all know, they're still used today. They have really low energy density though. So by both weight and volume, they're pretty inefficient, which is why you probably couldn't use your lead acid batteries for flying a plane, for example. And then you have nickel cadmium batteries, which was developed in the early 1900s, and they're still pretty commonly used for power tools. After that, you have nickel metal hydride, which was invented in the 1960s, and that was a pretty big jump in energy density. If you look, you can see the high end nickel metal hydride meets the sort of low end of early lithium ion technology in terms of energy density. And nickel metal hydride is actually pretty commonly used in hybrid car models today. Finally, you have the beloved lithium-ion batteries, which we all use today. The first prototype was created around 1985, but it wasn't until 1991 that Sony commercialized lithium-ion batteries, and that's what we pretty much use today. So batteries have come a really, really long way, and we've made a lot of significant advancements that have completely changed the way we live. If you really think about it, it's pretty remarkable how many of our devices are powered by batteries. But in the last 20 years, we really haven't had a breakthrough battery technology, at least one that's on a commercial level. And this is why I really like to show this plot, and I like to pair it with a second plot that's basically zoomed out a little bit. Because if you look at this second plot, you basically are able to compare battery technology with gas. And it really gives us a sense of how much ground we still have to cover when it comes to bridging the gap between batteries and gas. When you think about how much energy gasoline actually has, how energy dense it is, it's almost 30 times as much as the best lithium battery there is, which is pretty mind-blowing. So my goal with talking about the limitations of battery technology and showing this plot is really not to be this Debbie Downer of like, we have so much ground to cover, we're never going to get there. But it's really more so to think about this more realistically and honestly, because I personally think the biggest problem that we have right now is that we're in this race against time to get to zero emissions. And instead of waiting for the next best battery breakthrough technology, I think that we really need to start thinking about how to use the technology we have today in a more efficient way. So I know that there's a lot of battery scientists working on really great advancements, and we have a lot more scientists today than we did, 20 years ago. So I'm sure we'll get to a pretty good place with that. But I like to think of it as sometimes the solutions don't need to be on a chemistry level. We could maybe think about it in a way that uses the batteries in a way that maximizes their strengths and minimizes their weaknesses. So I personally think swappable batteries are the way to go, but that's maybe for a different time.
So the implication of the information in these graphs, one implication is that if you want to have an electric car that's kind of equivalent in terms of range to a gas-powered car, you need just a huge volume and weight of batteries on board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you just need to pack enough energy in there to get you through that range. So it's like you have to pack as much energy as you would in a 10-gallon tank of gas is how many batteries you would need for the same amount of range. But the problem is then you're talking about trade-offs, right? So you could potentially have a really, really, really big battery, but then you have a ton of weight, you lose a ton of space. The interesting thing about batteries is that with every advancement you make in one direction, there is a trade-off in a different direction. And it's about how do you find the perfect balance of safety and energy density and power, because, you know, for example, an electric helicopter would need a ton of power in the beginning and then a little bit of coasting and then a ton of power to land, right? So it's like you would need a high power battery with a lot of energy in there to last the flight and then enough to land. So,
or you need a kiosk in the sky to swap out the battery.
There you go. You could do that too, like a little landing pad, you swap out the battery. I mean, the way I really think about it is, if we want mass EV adoption, we really can't give the consumer what we have today, right? Because if like Henry Ford told Americans that they had to wait 2 hours to fill up their gas tank, I really don't think we would live in the car culture that we have today. People would be like, no, let's just keep riding horses. That seems more efficient. I think that when we're thinking about EVs and you say fast charging, which is actually detrimental to the battery, so then you're just creating more waste sooner, it's really not the best solution. And then on top of that, charging infrastructure is really hard to get around. It's not like a one-to-one thing of like for every gas station you have a charging station. It's not one-to-one because the car's going to be parked there for 2 to 3 hours versus like 5 minutes. So I think there's a lot of differences and barriers we have to look at.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you go back to Henry Ford and build cars, 100-something years ago, you would have to bring all your gas around with you, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like
it goes through a little straw into your Model T gas tank or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for watching. This is Energy Nerd Show and Tell.
It's the show that we want to watch, so we're thinking maybe some of you energy nerds want to watch it too. If you do, then tell your friends and subscribe right around here. Click there,
And check
or there, or over here.
Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and where
Yeah,
else?
and the Energy Nerd website at energynerdshow.com. You can always go there. And if you want to be a guest, you can volunteer to be a guest. We love to have guests. In fact, that's kind of what the show is all about.
Absolutely.